The crack of dawn had barely touched Highland Vale when the thunder of galloping hooves shattered the valley's usual tranquility. 6 riders, dust clouds rolling in their wake, vanished beyond the horizon, leading a magnificent Palomino stallion in tow. From the window of her cedar farmhouse, Clara Whitstone stood motionless, her weathered hands tightening on the sill as her gray eyes followed the diminishing silhouettes. "You've made a grave mistake," she murmured, voice gruff from days of silence. "The biggest mistake of your sorry lives." What Frank Lancer and his gang couldn't know, what would become their undoing, was that the golden horse they'd just stolen, Apollo, was far from ordinary. Apollo had been meticulously trained with methods no outlaw would understand, and that error would cost them dearly. Highland Vale, frontier territory, 1876, was a realm of stark contrasts, towering pines casting long shadows across meadows vibrant with wildflowers, rugged mountains looming as silent guardians over precarious homesteads. The land itself was as fierce as it was beautiful. Fortunes and lives turned on the next storm or gunshot. Clara's farm sprawled at the valley's eastern end, where gentle fields rolled toward the distant, purple-hued peaks. For 5 years, since her husband Russell succumbed to pneumonia, it had been her refuge, a quiet life of horse breeding and training that offered respite from her secret past. At 48, lines etched around her eyes hinted at countless trials and choices overshadowing her new existence. Apollo wasn't merely a handsome, valuable stallion with a dazzling golden coat. He was Clara's last tangible link to Russell's memory, and the linchpin of her horse training business. Without him, her future was as precarious as a lone rider on a tight ledge. Morning light revealed broken tack in the stable, scuffed floorboards telling of Apollo's fierce resistance. "He fought," Clara murmured, pride and sorrow mingling. That broken bridle, deep gouges, evidence the stallion hadn't surrendered easily. Then she'd found the knife embedded in her bedpost, a menacing token from Lancer's gang, warning her to stay quiet. They should have wielded that blade differently, she thought. A miscalculation on their part. Stepping inside her home, Clara opened a cedar chest that lay untouched for years. Inside, carefully preserved in oiled wraps, lay relics of another life. A well-used revolver, a razor-sharp hunting knife, and her father's old detective badge. Decades ago, she'd been known by another name whispered in fear around smoky campfires, the Phantom Wrangler. For 15 years, she'd reigned as one of the most effective manhunters in the Western Territories, not through lightning-fast draws, but by understanding criminals more deeply than they understood themselves. Her father, once a federal detective, had taught her to track men the way others tracked game, to notice subtle patterns in footprints, to glean secrets from a stray thread or a half-burnt matchstick. When Outlaws murdered him, 19-year-old Clara had taken his lessons to heart, honing them until she was unstoppable. She cast a rueful glance at her old gear. She hadn't touched these items since marrying Russell, choosing peace over the endless pursuit of criminals. The Phantom Wrangler had faded into legend when Clara Whitstone retired to become a horse trainer. Now, Lancer's theft of Apollo forced her to resurrect that dormant side of herself. As she strapped on the revolver belt and unsheathed her rifle, Clara felt old instincts stirring awake, keen, cold, and precise as a hawk's gaze. The distant thunder of approaching hooves broke her reverie. She glimpsed Sheriff O'Connell riding up, his posture radiating urgency. 60 and grizzled, O'Connell had served Highland Vale for 2 decades, having known Clara back when she still occasionally turned in outlaws on secret bounties. "Morning, Clara," O'Connell greeted, dismounting swiftly. "Heard about a commotion at your place. Frank Lancer's behind it?" Clara nodded once. "He and 5 others took Apollo. Left a knife in my bed too, if you can believe it." The sheriff's face tightened. "That gang's no ordinary horse thieves. They burnt the Huffman Ranch last month. Body counts piling high. I was on my way to see if you needed help." Clara's eyes narrowed. "Help's appreciated, but not how you think. I'm taking Apollo back myself. They didn't just steal a horse from me. They threatened everything Russell and I built." O'Connell's expression reflected mingled admiration and concern. "We both know you used to be someone else. But they're dangerous, Clara." She exhaled, voice like ice. "So am I, Sheriff. They just don't know it yet." Apollo was far more than a prize stallion. Over 3 painstaking years, Clara had poured every shred of knowledge from her manhunting days into the horse's training. She'd taught him to memorize trails, to recognize hidden signals, to respond to subtle gestures few observers would notice. She had honed him like a living tool for infiltration, sabotage, and, above all, intelligence gathering. The unsuspecting Lancer gang thought they'd netted a mere trophy, a golden horse rumored to have excellent bloodlines. In truth, they'd abducted a cunning sentinel, an extension of Clara's old Phantom Wrangler skills. Still reeling from the confrontation, O'Connell tried dissuading her. "I'll wire the next county, rouse a posse. Those men are scattered, but we can corner them." Yet Clara shook her head. "By the time your telegrams answered, they'll have sold Apollo or moved him out of territory. Relying on men in badges didn't help me back when I needed it most." The sheriff's jaw set. "So you're riding alone?" "I always hunted alone before. It suited me. Anyway, they stole from me, not the Phantom Wrangler. This is personal, O'Connell," he sighed, recognizing the steely finality in her tone. "Then take care, Clara. Lancer's men are vicious. They killed the Johnsons up near Redwood Gulch." She swung onto her backup horse, a sturdy roan named Flint, her rifle strapped snug. "They'll find I'm not so easily cornered." As she rode into the foothills, faint morning mist clung to the grass. Clara's hearing, sharpened by years of solitary hunts, picked up faint echoes of Lancer's group heading south. Rather than follow the obvious path, she turned west, reading the subtle displacements of deer herds, the way small animals avoided certain areas. Hours later, she reached Miller's Bluff, a vantage point high over the valley. Through her binoculars, she surveyed the plains below. She spotted movements in the distance, 6 riders escorting a golden stallion. A typical lawman might try to chase them on direct lines, but the Phantom Wrangler had never been typical. Narrowing her eyes, Clara recognized the shape of Frank Lancer, standing out in a black hat and distinctively braided beard. He was inspecting Apollo, likely checking for injuries or verifying the horse's rumored pedigree. Beside him stood a city-dressed man with a glinting watch chain, reminiscent of bankers or racing aficionados. Suspicion flickered. This theft might be more than opportunistic, perhaps a planned acquisition of top-tier horseflesh for high-stakes racing or a shady horse-breeding racket. In her bounty hunting days, Clara had often uncovered bigger conspiracies behind seemingly random crimes. By late morning, she'd circled behind the riders to maintain stealth. She found cover in a rocky outcrop overlooking a hidden canyon, Black Crag Ravine, an infamous hideout for outlaws. Sure enough, the Lancer gang retreated into it, the imposing walls of black granite forming a natural fortress. Clara crouched behind an ancient pine, binoculars in hand. She watched the men set up camp. One wiry youth kept watch on a ridge, glancing occasionally at a greasy deck of cards. Inside the canyon's depths, tents dotted the area around a deep cave. They had every reason to feel safe. The law seldom ventured here, and rumor said it was cursed by some older tribe's legend. Apollo's presence among them was conspicuous. He resisted attempts to tether him, requiring 2 men to calm him enough for grooming. A half hour later, Frank Lancer stepped forward, scowling as the stallion danced away from him. The city man, presumably an investor or partner, kept glancing at papers from his leather folio. It was an organized operation. This gang's discipline was well beyond random cutthroats. Finding a concealed nook high above the canyon, Clara made a cold camp, chewing on dried jerky for supper. She replayed earlier hunts in her mind, cases where she infiltrated an outlaw ring by sowing confusion or using a vantage no one expected. A fresh wave of memory pulled her back to her father's voice. "A cunning fox hides his tracks, but in doing so, he often makes new ones." She'd mastered that principle, turning criminals' illusions of secrecy into vulnerabilities. Throughout her vigil, she heard small sounds from the camp below, men's laughter, the crackle of a fire, a harmonica's wistful melody. More than anything, her attention lingered on Apollo's subtle whinnies. She had taught him to make certain calls with distinct nuances, each signifying different information. Even from this distance, she picked out the pitch that indicated approximate guard positions, the one that flagged how many men were with him. Pride warmed her chest at his loyalty and intelligence. He was telling her exactly how to undo his captors from within. Before sunrise, Clara rose to resume observations, sliding into place as silently as a mountain cat. Frank Lancer's gang was stirring, men crawling from their bedrolls to rekindle the fire, while others readied horses for scouting. The city man, Elias Townsend, she overheard, complained about the damp canyon cold, draping a fine cloak about his shoulders. She studied each face, reading body language the way others might read a newspaper. A few more days, and she'd know each man's fears, habits, and weaknesses. She'd never lost that ability, even in her quiet farm years. Suddenly, Clara's heart kicked up a notch. Another figure appeared, Josie Lancer, Frank's sister, and a reputed horse handler of some renown. She had a towering, flame-red braid and the cold, appraising gaze of someone who respected only competence. Approaching Apollo, Josie examined his legs and teeth, as if searching for a brand or some hidden flaw. Apollo flicked his ears, stepping sideways in gentle defiance. Josie turned on Frank, words heated yet low. Clara couldn't make them out, but from Josie's gestures at Apollo, it was clear she suspected something unusual about the horse. Clara slipped from her vantage, circling wide to the canyon's western edge. She discovered a precarious path, winding upward to a rocky shelf above the main camp. Half an hour of careful scrambling brought her to a plateau where she nearly stumbled upon another observer. An older man in buckskins hunched behind a boulder. He too spied on Lancer's camp through a battered spyglass. Dropping to a crouch, Clara sized him up. He had the deliberate stillness of a seasoned scout, well-used buckskins, and a worn rifle laid across his knees. He hadn't heard her approach. That was a testament to her own skill, but also his distraction. "Fine morning for secret watchers," she said softly. He jumped, spinning with a startled oath. His hand dropped to a hidden knife before recognition flashed in his gaze. "Clara Whitstone, thought you were retired." She studied his weathered face a moment. "Jasper Reed, right? You used to scout for the marshals in Clearwater." Jasper nodded, wariness ebbing. "I've been trailing these men for weeks, ever since I learned my niece was entangled with them. Celeste is her name. She claims she's just a horse buyer for Lancer, but I suspect more." He returned to scanning the canyon. "I'm worried she's in over her head, locked in with criminals too dangerous to cross." Quietly, Clara explained her own situation. The stolen Apollo, the bedpost knife, the uneasy sense that Lancer's theft was part of something bigger. Jasper nodded gravely. "I've been watching Lancer's operation. They funnel stolen horses through a network of racing stables. Some rumor they also run contraband weapons, launder money for city financiers. Now with your horse in their mix, it's gotten more complicated." She eyed him. "Your niece, where does she fit?" Jasper shrugged, his gaze clouded by concern. "She's brilliant with horse bloodlines, official paperwork, forging pedigrees. Lancer uses her skills to pass stolen mounts off as legitimate stock. She told me she's trying to gather evidence to topple Lancer from within, but I'm not sure if that's true or if she's just too deep now." A slow exhalation followed. Clara had seen such moral gray areas often, folks who started as minor accomplices, gradually sinking into genuine criminal complicity. "That horse," Jasper jerked his chin toward Apollo. "I can't figure out. He's no normal stallion, moves like he's sizing up men, not the other way around." Clara gave a tight nod, deciding how much to trust him. "He's special, trained with techniques for infiltration and sabotage. My best method refined from years of manhunting." Jasper's eyes widened with astonishment. "So, the rumors about your Phantom Wrangler days were true?" She gave a humorless smile. "Truer than even the rumors say. From their hidden ledge, they observed morning routines in the canyon. Apollo's slightest moves told Clara volumes. Which guards had grown complacent, which found the horse unsettling. Each signal in his posture gave her new data. Meanwhile, Lancer conferred with Townsend, tension flaring. Townsend brandished ledgers at Lancer, pointing to Apollo, shaking his head. The dynamic reeked of bigger fish than mere horse stealing. "What do you aim to do, Clara?" Jasper asked, voice hushed. "No offense, but it's not just 6 men and a horse. They're part of something vast." She steeled her expression. "I know, my horse is my priority, but if we can collapse their entire enterprise in the process, so be it." "Then let me help," Jasper offered. "I want to save Celeste from going past the point of no return. You can use my knowledge of these mountains and of Lancer's routine." Clara nodded. She'd grown used to working alone, but infiltration might require inside help, especially if Celeste was truly an ally. "All right, we'll coordinate. I have some signals for Apollo. You keep watch on Celeste. Maybe she'll tip her hand soon, one way or another." They retreated to a safer spot, quietly hashing out a plan. Already, a new puzzle piece emerged. If Townsend was connected to wealthy circles or a corrupt racing circuit, then the stolen Apollo was destined for bigger stages than Lancer's hideout. The notion chilled Clara, but it also gave her hope, because once that horse integrated into a stable or major racetrack, his special training would unleash chaos no swindler expected. That evening, Clara used the final light of dusk to reposition near the canyon's entrance. Jasper parted ways, promising to slip closer to Celeste once darkness offered cover. Their plan was to run parallel intelligence, Clara focusing on Apollo's infiltration signals, Jasper listening for clues from Celeste about Lancer's grander scheme. Hidden behind a row of pine at the canyon's mouth, Clara could faintly observe the gang's nighttime routines. Lanterns glowed in the large central tent. Occasional bursts of rowdy laughter told of whiskey and gambling. Apollo stood in a small corral with other stolen mounts, muzzle lowered as if dozing. Yet Clara recognized his posture as the passive watch mode she'd taught him, quietly absorbing the camp's rhythms. Midway through the night, two men argued by the fire. One insisted they'd leave for the southwestern hills at first light. Another said they should hold until Townsend returned from meeting Somerset, a name that rang ominous to Clara. Somerset perhaps an influential figure funding this entire operation? If so, the conspiracy was bigger than a mere theft ring. Meanwhile, Celeste approached Apollo, gently running her palm along his flank. The stallion made a low nicker that Clara recognized as a tune-in signal, meaning he was gleaning new intelligence. Celeste's expression was troubled, suggesting she sensed something off about the horse's behavior. Once, Clara would have crept down to reclaim her mount under cover of darkness, picking off watchmen. But the older, more strategic Phantom Wrangler recognized a better way. She signaled softly with an owl-like whistle. Apollo flicked his ears, shifting one step. The camp dismissed the small movement, but for Clara, it was a coded response meaning, they're dividing, some leaving soon. This was precisely how she'd designed him to function, half spy, half saboteur, integrated in plain sight. All at once, lights flared near the canyon's southern approach. The watchers on that side dashed to investigate. Clara tensed, suspecting either lawmen or rival outlaws. But the lights turned out to be Lancer's own men returning from a recon mission. Tensions spiked anew. Disorganized calls echoed through the canyon. Perfect, she thought. Discord, confusion, eroded discipline. These were her allies. More chaos meant a chance to unravel everything from within. At dawn, with Jasper covering the valley below, Clara inched closer to the corral. The day's first task commenced. Men feeding horses, boiling coffee. Townsend hadn't returned, fueling rumors about Somerset's involvement. Lancer paced restlessly, spitting curses about their uncertain plan. Celeste hovered near Apollo, occasionally glancing around with that worried expression. Sensing an imminent shift, Clara used the vantage of a narrow ledge to watch. Sure enough, by mid-morning, the gang split. 3 men headed out with instructions from Lancer to scout the pass, while 4 remained to guard the hideout. Celeste, after a heated exchange with Lancer, marched over to the corral, saddled Apollo, and led him out. That drew immediate protests from one guard, but Celeste fixed him with a glare. "I'm checking a perimeter route like I was told. He's the best mount here." The guard scowled, but grudgingly let her pass. Clara's pulse quickened. Celeste was leaving the canyon on Apollo, presumably to do reconnaissance or run errands. If Celeste truly had misgivings about Lancer, this might be her turning point. If she was a staunch accomplice, it spelled trouble for Clara's plan. With stealth tested by years of practice, Clara slipped along the canyon rim, shadowing Celeste's path. The woman rode with familiarity, guiding Apollo around rocky sections expertly. The stallion pretended mild compliance, but Clara recognized subtle cues, feet placement that made travel slightly noisier, tail flicks that signaled readiness for disruption. They moved deeper into a winding gorge. Clara, perched on the ridge above, watched Celeste dismount at a stream to let Apollo drink. Tying him loosely, she pulled a small notebook from her coat, scrawling notes. After a moment, she tore out a page, stuffing it into a hidden pouch. The gesture was clandestine enough to confirm her involvement in some deeper plot or subterfuge. But which side? Suddenly, a distant gunshot rang from behind. In the canyon echoes, it was impossible to gauge direction. Celeste jerked upright. Apollo reared slightly. Clara flattened to the ground, scanning for threats. Another shot followed, then silence. The tension was palpable. Celeste quickly saddled Apollo and remounted, turning back toward the hideout. Before she left, she whispered something that made Apollo swivel an ear. The woman was no typical thug. She recognized a horse's intelligence, though not fully grasping his training. As they disappeared, Clara's mind churned. Celeste might be working an angle that undermined Lancer, or she might be forging alliances with bigger fish like Somerset. Hard to tell. Regardless, her choice to ride Apollo alone gave Clara her best opening. If Celeste was an ally, they might coordinate infiltration. If she was an enemy, Clara would reclaim Apollo by force. The stakes extended well beyond retrieving a stolen horse. It was about dismantling an enterprise that threatened the entire region's stability. By midday, word reached Clara that something larger brewed behind Frank Lancer's operation. Through Jasper's clandestine checks, they learned that Somerset was a powerful investor rumored to have close ties to officials in 2 territories. He was rumored to finance not just horse theft, but arms smuggling, land grabs, and even railed expansions. If Lancer's group had stolen Apollo on Somerset's behalf, it was part of a broader plan connecting unscrupulous financiers and violent outlaws. The notion churned Clara's old instincts. It all fit the pattern of syndicated corruption she'd once specialized in destroying. "I fear Apollo is meant to be showcased or crossbred," Jasper said grimly. "Somerset invests in prime horseflesh for secret racing circuits out west. Then he uses them to launder money or manipulate race outcomes for gambling profits." Clara pressed her lips tight. "If that's the plot, we're tackling more than a band of outlaws. We're facing a nexus of legitimate business and hidden crime. Typically, that's where my old Phantom Wrangler style is most needed." She rubbed the dusty muzzle of her rifle. "I've seen it before. Pull the right thread, the entire scheme unravels." That evening, the watchers in Lancer's hideout grew antsy. The group that had left in the morning failed to return. Rumors buzzed among the outlaws that Townsend was trying to finalize a deal with Somerset. Celeste moved about the camp with forced calm, stabling Apollo near the cave's entrance. The horse's body language indicated readiness, as if waiting for Clara's whistle. Once again, he signaled in small ways that men were packing supplies, that departure was imminent. Jasper found Clara at her vantage. "Celeste told me they're heading out tomorrow, moving their prime stolen horses to a new site beyond Pine Hills, possibly a staging area for Somerset's bigger operation. She wants to sabotage the move. I think she's secretly on our side." Clara measured those words carefully. "Could be, or she might be leading us into a trap to ensure we don't hamper them further." Jasper shook his head. "I trust her. She's my niece, after all, and confided in me she regrets ever contacting Lancer. She just didn't know how to break free without endangering herself." Clara weighed the risk. If Celeste was sincere, they had an inside ally who could unravel Lancer's operation from within. If not, they'd walk into a carefully orchestrated betrayal. But time was short. Somerset's infiltration, potential corruption among territorial officials, and the risk that Apollo might soon vanish from the region left little room for caution. "Fine," Clara decided. "We coordinate with Celeste, set up a meet. She can feed disinformation, disrupt the final transfer, while we position ourselves to strike." The plan took shape swiftly. Celeste would claim the route west was compromised by lawmen, steering Lancer toward a narrower pass near Devil's Arch. Meanwhile, Clara, Jasper, and a small group of allies, a telegrapher friend, a local rancher, and an ex-army demolitions expert, would blockade or sabotage that pass. "We do it without direct gunfire, if we can," Clara insisted. "I prefer psychological warfare. Sowed confusion leads men to make errors." Night blanketed the canyon. Through her spyglass, Clara observed Celeste quietly slip from the main camp area, approach an out-of-the-way corner. Jasper had stashed a note there. Celeste found it, read it, crumpled it with a grim nod, then returned to the central fire. Minutes later, she engaged Lancer in conversation, pointing at the western sky as if discussing weather or routes. Perfect, Clara thought. The seeds were being planted. Meanwhile, Apollo, cunning as ever, signaled a flurry of small movements, twitching an ear, stomping once. He was reporting that a suspicious figure, possibly Somerset's agent, had arrived near midnight. Clara tensed. If Somerset's infiltration was deeper than they'd predicted, tomorrow's plan might face unexpected complications. She could only hope her carefully orchestrated illusions would hold. As the midnight hush settled, Clara carefully wrote out instructions for her scattered allies. The telegrapher would intercept messages Lancer tried sending. The rancher, hosting a false rest stop, would delay or misdirect any supply wagon. The ex-army demolitions man would set harmless booby traps that triggered noise and confusion, not bloodshed. Meanwhile, Jasper Reed and Celeste, from within, would feed Lancer warnings about imaginary patrols, forcing him down the precarious route they'd rigged for maximum disruption. All hinged on Apollo's continued infiltration. His presence in Lancer's corral had unnerved them, but not enough to suspect the deeper truth. If at any point they realized the horse was no ordinary mount, the delicate ruse would crumble. Glancing at the battered bridle resting beside her, Clara inhaled slowly. "You are my best partner, Apollo," she whispered to the night. "Let's bring these cutthroats to their knees." Dawn found the canyon in a swirl of motion. Frank Lancer, impatient and fuming, barked orders for men to pack up. Celeste orchestrated the exit route with calculated persuasion. "Lawmen are thick on the main trails," she claimed. "We have to go by the Devil's Arch Pass if we want to avoid a firefight." Though some outlaws expressed doubt, Lancer's desperation overcame them. Townsend was nowhere to be seen. Somerset had sent only cryptic messages, and the whole operation seemed on shaky ground. They had no better plan. From her vantage, Clara watched the caravans form. Apollo, as the best stallion, led the stolen herd, with Celeste acting as caretaker. 4 heavily armed men rode as flank guards, while Lancer and 2 close henchmen traveled behind, suspicious eyes scanning the canyon walls. The tension was palpable. All it would take was a single false step or spooked horse to unleash chaos. Clara signaled Jasper, who'd taken a parallel ridge. He set off to relay final instructions to the telegrapher and rancher. The road to Devil's Arch was treacherous even in the best conditions. A winding trail along steep drop-offs, overshadowed by basalt columns shaped like demonic horns. It spooked many travelers into avoiding it altogether, perfect for an outlaw, with no legitimate route left. By midday, Lancer's group entered the pass, uneasy at the eerie quiet. At times, they dismounted to lead horses around precarious curves. Celeste, guiding Apollo, made sure to show subtle anxiety, feeding Lancer's sense of urgency. Behind them, Clara tracked carefully, occasionally releasing signals that sounded like random bird calls. Each sign told hidden allies it was time for the next layer of psychological warfare. At one bend, rustling brush suggested a waiting ambush, forcing the outlaws to halt in defensive formation. No enemy materialized, only an empty snare that might have caught an animal, yet the threat lingered in their minds, rattling nerves. Next, they encountered the rancher's decoy station, a small shack with signs of recent occupancy, but apparently abandoned in haste. The outlaws paused to search, finding nothing but scattered footprints, fueling paranoia that watchers lurked close. As men remounted, Apollo seized the moment to whinny an alarm-like call, prompting a chain reaction of snorts and stomping that made it nearly impossible for Lancer's crew to keep discipline. The tension soared. "And what's spooking those damn beasts?" Lancer hissed, scanning the rocky slopes. Down the trail, the demolitions man had set harmless tripwires that released rolling stones, echoing ominously through the pass. Twice in 10 minutes, the riders found themselves on high alert, scanning ridges for snipers. They saw no one, yet the unpredictability of the environment sapped their resolve. The pass felt haunted by invisible watchers, an echo of the rumored phantom wrangler lore that criminals told in hushed voices. Lancer's men snapped at each other. One even threatened to shoot Celeste for bad directions. She shot back that, without her knowledge of safe paths, they'd have fallen off a cliff hours ago. It was a precarious dynamic, ready to fracture at the slightest spark. By late afternoon, the group reached a narrow gorge overshadowed by basalt towers, the dreaded Devil's Arch. This final stretch was the most perilous, a meandering footpath wide enough for a single horse at a time. On the other side lay relative safety, open range leading to Somerset's rumored staging area. But the pass demanded total caution. The slightest misstep, or an explosive outburst, would send men and horses tumbling into the abyss below. Clara, perched in a concealed recess above, signaled Apollo for the culminating manipulation, a controlled but dramatic spook. As Celeste guided him through the gorge, Apollo abruptly reared, forcing the entire column to halt in cramped quarters. The men cursed, struggling to keep other horses from panicking. The lagging outlaws collided with Lancer, who yelled for order. Celeste feigned confusion, while Apollo drummed his hooves, reflecting a carefully rehearsed meltdown. Meanwhile, the front of the line, pinned by limited space, couldn't progress or retreat. Sensing the meltdown, Clara allowed her presence to become half-known, letting Lancer's rearguard glimpse a fleeting shape in the basalt columns. They opened fire, sending ricocheting bullets that spurred further chaos. Rocks tumbled, horses whinnied, men shouted. The pass became a tempest of confusion, each element meticulously engineered by the Phantom Wrangler's overarching plan. "Steal my horse," she murmured from her vantage, "and see how quickly your world collapses." As the Devil's Arch Canyon thundered with echoes of pistol fire and clattering hooves, Clara sprang from her concealed nook. The outlaws had whipped themselves into disorder so total that her direct involvement now felt almost anticlimactic. Apollo seized the moment to bolt forward, tail lashing, nearly toppling one of Lancer's men into the abyss. Celeste clung to the stallion's reins, expertly feigning an attempt to calm him, while discreetly ensuring his progress toward the pass's exit. Frank Lancer, face twisted in furious disbelief, screamed at his men to hold formation. But with no coherent chain of command left, they scattered in small clusters, each trying to regain control of skittish horses on a barely shoulder-wide path. Some tried to reach Celeste, suspecting betrayal. Others aimed guns at the elusive figure, Clara, moving among basalt spires above. Yet none had a clear shot without risking a friend's life, or prompting a fatal misstep on the narrow ledge. Jasper Reed emerged from the gorge's far side, rifle raised, corralling the front of Lancer's column. "Drop your weapons," he bellowed. Two men complied immediately, spooked by the near-impossible terrain and their own battered morale. Another tried to pivot his horse, but the space was too tight. In moments, Jasper had them at bay, with nowhere to flee but a deadly fall. Toward the rear, Clara slid down a slope to block Lancer himself. He glared, brandishing a revolver. "You crazy witch," he spat, voice quivering. "You planned all this?" Clara's expression was cold as mountain ice. "You stole Apollo. You threatened me on my own land. Now you pay." Furious, Lancer leveled his gun, but a spook from a half-panicked horse jostled his aim. Clara dashed forward, smashing the pistol from his grip with a single rifle butt strike. He stumbled, nearly tipping over the edge. Celeste, meanwhile, coaxed Apollo to higher ground, clearing the path for a final standoff. Freed from the stallion's presence, the remaining mounts found fleeting calm, but the outlaws themselves were done. The psychological warfare had wreaked havoc, each small deception and manipulated obstacle compounding. They stood exposed on a precarious shelf, half surrounded by Clara's allies. Even if they mustered the will to fight, it would risk all their lives to a final tumble. Within minutes, the conflict ended not with a blaze of glory, but with exhausted men dropping weapons in resignation. Lancer, cursing under his breath, let Clara secure his wrists. The stolen horses, Apollo's lesser companions, huddled close, battered by the day's confusion. Celeste slid off the palomino, breathing hard. For a moment she stared at Clara, relief and perhaps a trace of shame. "I didn't want any of this," she managed. Clara nodded curtly. "Jasper told me. You've a knack for forging pedigrees. Lancer exploited your skills." Celeste nodded, tears threatening. "I stuck around, hoping to gather enough evidence to bring him down. But it all spiraled. Apollo gave me the first sign that the tide might turn." She placed a hand on the stallion's golden neck. "He's remarkable. I realized he was on a mission of sorts. Thank you for not standing in his way," Clara said, her voice gentler. "We'll see that you're treated fairly if you cooperate in testifying against Lancer and those behind him." Eyes flicking to Lancer, Celeste exhaled. "I've no loyalty left to that scum." Marshal Gibson appeared from behind a cluster of basalt columns, accompanied by two uniformed deputies who'd ridden quietly in under Clara's signal to finalize arrests. He gave Clara a measured salute. "Phantom Wrangler, I believe?" The ghost of a smile curved her lips. "I prefer Clara Whitstone nowadays, Marshal. But yes, we've apprehended your outlaws for you." Gibson cast an appraising look at the chaos. Trembling horses, Duval, Lancer, cuffed, men disarmed, terrain scarred by the manufactured havoc. He let out a low whistle. "All done without a single bullet from you?" Clara merely shrugged. Why shoot bullets when you can unravel an entire operation from within? She stroked Apollo's mane, and the stallion pressed gently against her hand in silent affirmation. In the aftermath, the conspiracies that Clara had uncovered found corroboration in captured documents. Lancer's ledger revealed transactions with Somerset, naming crooked officials in 2 territories. The Northern Expansion plan to sabotage railway lines and amass stolen thoroughbreds for syndicated racing rings was spelled out in chilling detail. For many, the revelations would bring sweeping arrests, including Townsend, possibly Somerset himself, and any corrupt lawmakers on the take. A day later, with the captured gang locked away and evidence safely in the marshal's custody, Clara stood on a high bluff at sunset, Apollo at her side. She inhaled the crisp, pine-scented wind. She had regained her precious horse, but in the process, she'd also revived the dormant Phantom Wrangler, using him as her greatest asset. "They thought to intimidate me, but they only unleashed us," she murmured. Apollo gave a quiet snort, as if in agreement. In the valley below, Celeste prepared statements for the territorial court, aided by Jasper's unwavering support. Marshal Gibson orchestrated a broad crackdown on Somerset's circles, and a hush spread among outlaws across the territory. A rumor that the famed Phantom Wrangler hadn't retired after all. She'd only become more dangerous, forging an alliance with a horse that saw more than human eyes and worked with a mind beyond human cunning. Stealing that golden horse had proven the ultimate miscalculation, the final straw that sealed the conspirators' fate.